I see you. Let's talk. Night. Dark. Let me tell you, the only thing that matters is the hand holding the gun. Still got that crown? What the hell for? Things not getting any less creepy. Vanguard's riding with crowns. Everything's all good or all bad to them. No in between. They won't last long. How about some gambit? You just standing there. Think the Traveler realizes it's got competition? The bullet always comes when you're not moving. Hey, you see moats out there, you bring them to Drifter, you hear? Moats are dark out there, just wait, brother. Go get some. Light, dark. Let me tell you, the only thing that matters is the hand holding the gun. The bullet always comes when you're not moving. Vanguard don't know that I've been running with the gang on Europa. I know I can trust you to keep it that way. Guardians are always welcome aboard the Dipper. Give Moondust a shout for me, would you? Find moats out there, you bring them to me. Hey, let me know whenever you feel like throwing some taken at your friends. You ready to ship out? There's enemies of humanity to shoot. Keep choosing the winning side, kid. You'll keep on winning. Simple as that. I see you. Let's talk. Keep choosing the winning side, kid. You'll keep on winning. Simple as that. How about some gambit? You just standing there. Keep choosing the winning side, kid. You'll keep on winning. Simple as that. To the stranger, brother. Guards riding with crowns. Everything's all good or all bad to them. No in between. They won't last long. Find moats out there, you bring them to me. You ever tried ether fizz, hero? That'll put hair on your tongue. You ready to ship out? There's enemies of humanity to shoot. So those new kids on the block, the Scorn? That's some interesting biology. I'm sure I could find a use for that flammable. Who's up for Gambit? I gotta raid one of those Tex Mechanica foundries at some point. Closest thing to a Dark Age piece you can get. I know he has. I've seen no shortage of guns from him. You looking for a gunfight? Gambit could use you. Vanguard's riding with crowns. Everything's all good or all bad to them. No in between. They won't last long. Dark. Let me tell you, the only thing that matters is the hand holding the gun. Moats are dark out there, just wait, brother. Go get some. I've made some enemies in my time, believe me. The things I kill are ugly. The things I couldn't, well, they're pretty ugly too. Worse, because of the bullet wounds. Think the Traveler realizes it's got competition? Moats are dark out there, just wait, brother. Go get some. Hey, I'm curious as the next fellow about what you did out in Draper City. But you know what? If they don't like it, to hell with them. How many times you saved this pretty little rock? How many times you saved this reality? I know you. Trust. Vanguard's riding with crowns. Everything's all good or all bad to them. No in between. They won't last long. Gunfight? Gambit could use you. I see some of you looking at me like I'm nuts. You think all this, Gambit, is for nothing? That I do this because I like it? Brother, you don't know the half of it. I'm curious as the next fella about what you did out in the Dreaming City. But you know what? If they don't like it, to hell with them. How many times you saved this pretty blue rock? How many times you saved this reality? I know you will do. Trust. You're looking spry. This is gonna take some time. But when we're done, I'll have a battle-ready crew. One man can't fight an army. Hero. That'll put hair on your tongue. How about some gambit? You're just standing there. Hey, heard you were up to no good out there. What happened? Rumors saying ascending portals opening up everywhere. Sometimes I think you're crazy. Think the Traveler realizes it's got competition? Got somewhere to be? How about Gambit? Hey, you see moats out there. You bring them to Drifter, you hear? Playing hero in the reef, huh? The Vanguard's riding with crowns. Everything's all good or all bad to them. No in between. They won't last long. Gambit could use you. Think the Traveler realizes it's got competition. You're looking spry. Light, dark. Let me tell you, the only thing that matters is the hand holding the gun. Keep an eye on the sky, hero. All this glimmer's worthless if we're dead. How about some gambling? You're just standing there. Think the Traveler realizes it's got competition. Times down in the Elixir Quarter. Come closer. I don't bite, unless I'm hungry. Light, dark. Let me tell you, the only thing that matters is the hand holding the gun. What do you need? Talk to me. So, the Hive's got the light. Always knew we wouldn't be the only ones, but I didn't think it'd be them. Moats are dark out there, just wait, brother. Go get some. Think the Traveler realizes it's got competition? I've had people tell me this is dumb. He can see you. You're standing right here. But can he? It's been working so far. How do you find one light in a sea of lights? See any odd coral rooms out there, you let me know. The things I've killed you wouldn't believe. You see the derelict's dragon? Moats are dark out there, just waiting, brother. Go get some. Give Moondust a shout for me, would you? Playing hero in the reef, huh? Keep choosing the winning side, kid. You'll keep on winning. Simple as that. You looking for a gunfight? Gambit could use you. This is gonna take some time. But when we're done, I'll have a battle-ready crew. One man can't fight an army. Keep an eye on the sky, hero. All this glimmer's worthless if we're dead. What do you need? Talk to me. Keep choosing the winning side, kid. You'll keep on winning. Simple as that. You looking for a gunfight? Gambit could use you. Feel like hunting some prime evils? There are always more. You're looking spry. You know, being the invader in Gambit, that feeling of empowerment, that's what the Taken feel. I'm just saying, light isn't the only source of power out there. Moats are dark out there, just waiting, brother. Go get some. Light, dark. Let me tell you, the only thing that matters is the hand holding the gun. If I see you, that means I got you. Keep choosing the winning side, kid, and you'll keep on winning. Simple as that. Gunfight? Gambit could use you. Do you like my dingy hallway? I like my dingy hallway. Your vanguard never come back here. Bunch of softies. Don't turn out like them, you hear? You're better than that. Where do prime evils come from? Ascendant Plane. Oldest Taken I can find. For a gunfight? Gambit could use you. Where do prime evils come from? Ascendant Plane. Oldest Taken I can find. say we get this over with? You think 'cause the darkness is talking to you now, you're too good for Gambit? Come on. Drifter needs his moments. I see some of you looking at me like I'm nuts. You think all this, Gambit, is for nothing? That I do this 'cause I like it? Brother, you don't know the half of it. You ready to ship?
I don't think you really should send your kids to any universities. My daughter will be at the age where she will go to college soon, and I told her don't go to college, become an electrician.
Let me tell you, the only
I don't
thing
think
that
anybody
matters
should go to
is the
college,
hand
and I
holding
never
the gun.
would have imagined 10 years ago I would have ever have said. My main argument would be, it is better to stare at a wall for 4 hours than to practice something that will lead you away from reality for 4 hours. College teaches you things as a system, the fundamental values of the overwhelming majority of college, they're just out of alignment with reality, and they're in their own little reality bubbles. It's better to do nothing than to learn things that are false.
Think the traveler realizes it's got competition.
Okay, so joining me on the Freedom Pack podcast today, Peter Boghossian, philosopher specializing in critical thinking, author, and many other things. Peter, welcome to the Freedom Pack podcast, my friend.
Welcome. I love that accent. Very, very good. Excellent. So we were just talking about jiu-jitsu. So when did you start jiu-jitsu?
Oh, very, very recently. Very recently. I'm talking maybe 2 months, only a couple of sessions in.
How's it going for you?
It's very, very fun, but it's very, very humbling at the same time.
That is certainly true.
Always knew we wouldn't be the only
So let's talk about this
but I didn't
before we
think
get
it
started
then.
here.
Yeah.
So I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time, and I've seen the sport change very, very, very dramatically. Like, it used to be super roughhousey, and when I did it long ago, like we used to, I trained in stick and knife fighting for years, and so we would do stick and knife fighting and then just take it to the ground. But those were other times. Dan Medina was the guy who gave me my black belt in stick fighting, and he's still around. You can see videos of him online, and he is an extraordinarily dangerous man. I mean, truly dangerous. But when
Probably less than
I don't do the stick stuff to the ground anymore. I just do jiu-jitsu. I don't throw strikes either, but I agree with you. It's an incredibly humbling experience, and it's also something that can't be faked because it's closer to reality. And the closer something is to reality, the more difficult it is to fake. Like playing a musical instrument or speaking another language, it can't be faked. So I wish you luck on your journey, your jiu-jitsu journey, and just remember, I'll give you my unsolicited advice. If you're on the bottom, take top. Fight for top. If you're on top, stay on top. So top is the key, because you don't want to be fighting against gravity. And then the other thing is, it's far better to work on your escapes than it is your submissions. So don't be the guy who taps out white belts or blue belts or whatever. Be the guy who nobody can pin down.
Yeah. Well, when you
like
mentioned
Gordon Ryan.
Oh, absolutely. When you mentioned jiu-jitsu, it didn't really take me by surprise because it seems as though a lot of very effective people seem to enjoy jiu-jitsu. Why do you think that is?
Hey, you think pros still
That's a very,
exist
very,
over that
very-
whole Aldrin thing?
not just jujitsu. It's the legitimate martial arts. Not these fake wannabe dojos, no. The true martial artists. Not just jujitsus.
Let's do business.
Question, and I'm gonna not answer for it. I'm gonna ask why people who are woke
So those new
avoid
kids
jujitsu.
on the block, the scorn.
And then I'll answer it.
That's
So
some
woke
interesting
people,
biology.
people caught in the orbit of
I'm
critical
sure I
social
could find a
justice or
use for that
social
flavor.
justice ideology, uppercase S and J, or used to be called kind of regressive leftism or the successor ideology. Wesley Yan calls it that. Whatever you want to call it. They don't create. They don't make. They don't build. They don't compete. They destroy. And to be successful at jiu-jitsu, well, to be successful in anything, it takes an insane amount of work to truly be successful. But to be successful at jiu-jitsu,
Got somewhere to
it
be?
takes...
How about
and
gaming?
your word is perfect. I mean, you have to humble yourself. I can't even... so tens of thousands of times
I'm
before
old
you get
school
your
in the game.
black belt. I was just watching the
Sure, you get paid.
Machado video today, right before this. And that guy is just smooth as butter. And these guys at the upper tier are just, they're just like... My goal is to make my jiu-jitsu indistinguishable from napping. So if anybody looked at me, they thought that I was like half asleep on the mat. That's a level of relaxation that I aspire to. But I think that the amount of work and what one has to do to, I don't know, prostrate isn't quite the right word, but to humble oneself tens of thousands of times before one advances. I don't think woke people as a whole can do that. I don't think it's possible.
Send my regards
Meet
to
Tubi,
Stranger.
your go-to app for free streaming. With 3 times fewer ads than cable, Tubi has over 40,000 movies and shows. Enjoy Hollywood hits, classics, and originals. Tubi also features live news and some of your favorite sports networks. No credit cards or passwords needed. Watch at home or on the go. Download Tubi and start watching today.
Moats are dark out there, just wait, brother. Go get some.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I was just trying to think of an example of someone who I could think of
I've
who's,
had many
you know, quite woke
Oh,
or that way politically, but
City
I
age,
can't think of anyone
I got
who's
one now.
quite
It's
probably
never
quite
the same
effective on the mat.
Not
Yeah,
my
and
fault,
look at people who
but they
aren't
just
woke.
keep dying
I mean, there are
out.
some gyms that are left-leaning for sure. I can think of one here in Portland that's kind of left-leaning. But most of the jiu-jitsu gyms, I wouldn't say they're political, but it just takes a certain attitude to do jiu-jitsu. I mean, you can't... It is not a sport for everyone, although everybody should do it. You know, I've been watching those fights on Fight Haven. Have you seen that Twitter feed?
No.
Oh, they're really interesting. So basically, people send in
Hey, you think
fight
Cole's still in
videos,
a twist
and
over that
and
whole
and
Oldgren thing?
I saw a super disturbing one today. It was more of a snuff film than a fight video, but it just shows, you know, people in street fights. And what is consistently amazing to me in those videos is people simply do not know how to fight, yet they initiate fights. I mean, it's such a profound, you know, Socrates talks about, if you had all the right information, if you had all the information,
ready
you
to
wouldn't
ship
act
out?
in certain
There's
ways, and you
enemies
wouldn't
of
believe certain
humanity.
things.
Shoot.
I mean, you know, from the little jiu-jitsu you've done, I mean, that is an extraordinarily, somebody
Grab a
with,
couple of your friends and
first of all, if
grab
somebody
some
does
notes.
jiu-jitsu and somebody else does not do jiu-jitsu, the person who does not do jiu-jitsu simply does not have a chance, unless they have something else going for them. Like, they're only, Matt Thornton has a great book on this, and we can change the topic if you want, but The Gift of Violence, which is coming out pretty soon. It's like having a superpower. So it's possible if you're really good at Muay Thai, because there are only about 5 things that work. Muay Thai, boxing, kickboxing, Savate, wrestling. It's possible, bracketing record wrestling, that you could win Although if the person has reasonably good takedowns, like a high school
Anyone who
wrestler,
says I'm shady,
they're going to go down. It's very difficult to avoid being taken down, or at least being in a clinch with someone who is completely committed to taking you to the ground. But what's amazing.
Huh, interesting he says that, because yeah, I actually can attest for that. I really excel in the ground game. I know you can throw punches out there all you want. I know I can take it. If you want to start a fight, I'll clinch.
you
I'll
ready
take
to
you to the
ship
ground.
out?
and
There's
I'll choke you
enemies of
unconscious.
humanity to shoot.
I'll just end the fight.
How's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Streaming some YouTube, sharing a video.
Come on, who's up for Gambit?
As I was having a smoke, it was a video about this guy called Peter Boghossian, Downfall of Academia, Social Justice. Came in perfect time, I guess we'll stop that. Are you online? Are you back yet? Nope.
Still can't play yet.
It's been a while. They might just be trying to be nice friends, dude. If you're there every day, they might just want some alone time.
Sad.
Yeah, it's sad, but after all, someone else's console, bro. I had to do that at one point with one of my roommates. They had 2 consoles. I got to play on one. Oh yeah. I already have everything I needed. I just need to have my smoke.
They had do stuff, that's all.
Oh yeah, and that friend of yours you were talking to on the phone, by the way, he never showed up or even came back on. If you did go on your account, you hit offline.
He will.
Put those people on a mat for 2 months, and then it's the best form of anger control available. Because guys will be, half their size, be wiping.
Well, since you left, I haven't seen him. That's all I've said. Just letting you know.
You can't lose your temper. So just truly kick the shit out of you. So
There's 2 former UFC fighters that I've spoken to on this podcast. One, George St. Pierre, and 2, Dan Hardy. Both, just from talking to them, I recognise quickly that both have a real interest in philosophy. And Dan Hardy in particular was telling me about how he reads books on philosophy from the perspective of how he can implement that philosophy into his training. Do you see any parallels between philosophy and fighting?
absolutely. Yeah, I do. But it doesn't mean everyone who does philosophy can engage in combat sports. So first there's a kind of dialectic, right? So if you read someone says something, someone else comes.
Oh yeah, when you get on, the Wish Ender bow for you is going to be a bit of a challenge. I rewatched the video, but it can be done.
buy travel insurance from Pacific Blue Cross. BC's health experts will help
I
you
have
get
no
completely
idea
covered.
here. Martial arts. That makes a sense.
Well, Brett's friend. Portland is like an open sewer. It's a sex. That's why I'm announcing it the first time here. I'm leaving. I guess it is an exclusive. I despise it. I used to love this place, but it's been hijacked by social justice. And you should check out his Twitch feed.
All right, Mavericks. Ready to see what you're fighting today? Hi! Bring a sword. Let's be bad guys. Takes about 100 of Shax's Red Jacks to kill a Hive Knight. Does he bother building them? Transmat firing! Let's hunt some hostiles, brother. Bring their moats to the bank.
Been there, kick gas and chew bubble. Now I'm all out of bubble.
Hostiles incoming at the burrow!
You see yet, Deadpool? Who my idol is in this world? As quick as Cade.
Hostiles incoming at command! Sending medium blocker.
Finally, darkness in the light. Oh shit, that's not gonna be easy. Well, the left left blocker team. Come on, come on. Prioritize now. Team, if you're gonna make me be the only one here, I'm gonna say fuck you all and
Incoming at the burrow!
let you fail. Thank you. Leader is gonna get through the six souls. There's only so
Portal's
much
up.
one person
Go
can
take
do.
'em out.
We're a team of 4.
I
Work
spot a
together.
high-value target. Give them hell!
When there's blockers, prioritize. When there's an invader, you prioritize. Only way to get you wins.
Portal is primed. Lock it. High-value target destroyed. You're nearly there. Build a bank. Get that primeval up. Incoming hostiles at the ring.
Come on, team. Bank and let's go. Let's get this goddamn triangle.
Primeval's up. Target the envoys first. Find them before they find you. Fight dirty. I like it. Enemy invaded down. Damn it, snag homes.
Ninjas of the ground. Come on, team. What are you doing? Get to the convoys.
I'm evil compromised. Burn it down. Invaders here. Brace yourself.
On the heavy emphasis.
Enemy invader down.
Let's pick up the heavy emphasis.
Invader incoming.
That thing.
Invaders
Moving up
out. You'll get them next time. Envoy's dead. Kill the Prime Eagle.
Look at your name, dude, on the map. How far away is some envoy going to Remember that warning I gave before? It's still freaking flight. Pull your weight.
Invader inbound. Hunt.
Jeez, Drifter, yet again, you're doing nothing. Run away like a coward. Get the hell out of this game, bitch.
Invader's gone. Get him next time.
Pick up your Lego.
I'm evil compromised. Burn it down. Invaders here. Brace yourself.
Guys, keep your eyes off the crosshairs. Look for the invader. Or that's gonna freaking happen time after time. Am I talking to blueberries or what? I'm not enjoying Dunkirk either.
Invaders out. You'll get them next time.
Drifter, get your fucking ass in the proper spot and deal with the goddamn envoy.
I'm evil compromised. Focus your fire. You're being invaded. Find them before they find you. Invaders gone. Get them next time.
I can call games from the moment the fucking happens. So when you even a fucking mess. Like, look at this. No matter what I've done, it's all been fucking ruined. Nice and easy to put damage in. Welcome to the School of Hard Knocks, folks.
Watch your back. Invader incoming. Enemy invader down. Hey, you can't blame him for trying.
You, Titan, get in the fucking fray. Maybe a YouTuber, maybe a game tester, but I do not care to see what goes on. Dead weight, dead weight.
Convoys hate.
Drifter
Cover
shooting
that primeval.
shield of primeval.
Invaders here. Brace yourself, brother. We've got some moves.
So you're only
Haven't
saving
seen shooting
grace
like
if
that
they're more retarded
since an
than
iron
the
lady
bunch.
named Ephrodite ruined my bar.
And you sit
Dark
probably
Age
thinking,
was
oh look how good we are, we
wild
all fucking
Good
are."
work.
Not realizing they're immature, worse than you. Seems to be one of those fucking days. I hate stupid people, man. It's really annoying. Bloody hell. Okay, give me one. I'm having a smoke. Having a team of one friend or more, that's a different story, but a bunch of randoms? Hell no, I will not carry them.
Portland. It just reminded me of it. I was speaking to Brett Weinstein the last time I.
So I very similar to I'd done so, but I figured kickboxing. Amazing to me in those videos is people simply do not know how to fight, yet they initiate fights. I mean, it's such a profound, Socrates talks about if you had all the right information, if you had all the information, you wouldn't act in certain ways and you wouldn't believe certain things. I mean, from the little jiu-jitsu you've done, I mean, that is an extraordinarily, somebody with, first of all, if somebody does jiu-jitsu and somebody else does not do jiu-jitsu, the person who does not do jiu-jitsu simply does not have a chance, unless they have something else going for them. Like they're only Matt Thornton has a great book on this, and we can change the topic if you want. But The Gift of Violence, which is coming out pretty soon. It's like having a superpower. So it's possible if you're really good at Muay Thai, because there are only about 5 things that work: Muay Thai, boxing, kickboxing, savate wrestling. It's possible, bracketing record wrestling, that you could win. Although if the person has reasonably good takedowns, like a high school wrestler, they're going to go down. It's very difficult to avoid being taken down, or at least being in a clinch with someone who is completely committed to taking you to the ground. But what's amazing to me about those videos is that people simply do not understand the consequences of what fighting means. Like they just, and yet they let their anger overcome them. You put those people on a mat for 2 months, and that is the best form of anger control available, because guys would be, half their size would be wiping the floor with them. It's incredibly, and you cannot lose your temper when you do that. You can't lose your temper, because someone could just truly kick the shit out of you. So
there's 2 former UFC fighters that I've spoken to on this podcast. One, George St. Pierre, and 2, Dan Hardy. Both, just from talking to them, I realized quickly that both have a real interest in philosophy. And Dan Hardy in particular was telling me about how he reads books on philosophy from the perspective of how he can implement that philosophy into his training. Do you see any parallels between philosophy and fighting?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. But it doesn't mean everyone who does philosophy can engage in combat sports. Okay. So first, there's a kind of dialectic, right? So if you read the Platonic dialogues, it's the best example. Someone says something, someone else counters Socrates. What is piety? What is justice? What have you? And then Socrates counters that, and then they engage each other. So there's a kind of intellectual pugilism, if you will. There's a kind of intellectual combativeness. The other thing is, if you do philosophy right, and I'm convinced that philosophy itself, the discipline, has become not only utterly, I was going to use a Star Trek word, but that I've done so, but I figured why. I've already talked about jiu-jitsu. Let's not go down the Star Trek rabbit hole. If you do philosophy right, and I don't think philosophy is done right. In fact, I think it's done wrong, and I've never managed to do well in anything to do with philosophy. I don't think I fit the mold. You have to have a kind of openness to ideas and arguments, and that you have to entertain them and know them well enough so that you can respond to them. And it's very similar to a combat sport. Like, you really have to because it can't be faked, you really have to understand why things work and why things don't work. And then you have to, it's like a chess with far more variables, speed chess with far more variables. So I do think there's a close connection there. But again, I just because somebody is good at, or has published a lot in philosophy, I can think of some of my former colleagues, there's simply no way they would ever go on a mat, because they won't undergo the process that it takes to be good, which is tapping and submitting.
When you were talking about heading off, you were talking about the gyms in Portland, it reminded me of it. I was speaking to Brett Weinstein. The last time I spoke to Brett Weinstein on this podcast, he described Portland to me as a third world city. Yeah. What would you say to that?
Well, Brett's friend, Portland is like an open sewer. It's a cesspool. That's why I'm moving, as I'm kind of announcing it the first time here. I'm leaving.
Well, exclusive.
It is an exclusive. I despise it. I used to love this place, but it's been hijacked by social justice, and people still haven't learned their lessons. The mayor is a public disgrace. Ted Wheeler, him. You should check out his Twitter feed. The murder rate is up 300%. Matt Thornton would be a great guest for this podcast. He could really speak to this in a way that I cannot, in terms of statistics and the violence. So I agree with, I'm probably talking a lot because I've had maybe 100 cups of coffee. I coffee up before I go to jiu-jitsu. So yeah, no, I agree. The homelessness is terrible. Addiction is a huge problem. They don't have as Michael Schellenberger writes in San Francisco, they don't have a shelter first, housing earned policy. They have open tent camping, and I just read something, a large number of fires in the most number of fires are caused by homeless folks in burning things in tents, whether that's bringing barbecues in there or I don't even know, but it's from tents and the crime. So I have this thing on my phone. It's the Ring doorbell app. You know what that is? So it's like it's like every time someone comes in my house, I have to have TV cameras all around my house. It never used to be like this, by the way. So I'm constantly getting these alerts. Gives you a special sound like ding, 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 and it's all the crazy shit that happens in Portland. It's like murder over here, porch pirate over here, car stolen here, dog mutilated over here. It's just this constant stream, and that's among the people who have the app. So I think one more thing, and I'm talking a lot. I won't talk too much, but
please.
One more thing. I think it's really important that we have a kind of democratic accountability. And so what is happening to Portland now is a direct response of how people have voted. It is a direct response of the attitudes that people have. And so to expect anything other than what it is it's foolishness. It's a kind of insanity. So of course you're going to get this. What else could it be? You couldn't get anything else given the governance that you yourselves have voted in. You meaning the people of Portland.
It's interesting. It reminds me of, I remember listening to Jordan Peterson talking about what he said publicly, that there's almost a list of universities these days and cities and universities in certain cities that you should never send your children to. What are your thoughts on that?
A list of universities? I don't think you really should send your kids to any universities. So in the university system, you have math, you have whatever the subject areas may happen to be, you have philosophy, but then you also have a parallel architecture that's been set up in which insert word studies is set up, gender studies. And so gender studies isn't merely the study of gender, it's the study of gender. And these fields, and that's really among the most generous thing one could say about them, these fields operate by their own rules. They have their own methodologies. They have their own ways that they advance. So, for example, one thing that they use is lived experience. In the literature, it's called standpoint epistemology. So we all have our own lived experience, and we need to, a word they're very fond of, privilege certain sorts of life experiences. So I can never, as a cis white heterosexual male, experience or have access to the lived experience of somebody who has more oppression variables than I have. So to understand that, we need a field of study, critical race theory, critical studies, which is just, it's interesting, by the way, at Portland State University, there was an event in which white people could attend but couldn't ask questions. So it was a listening event.
and what could possibly go wrong with telling people to shut up based on their skin color?
First of all, I was amazed that was legal at a public institution. So a long story short, I found out that it was legal, but it was inadvisable, because if you do that, then you could create another event for white people where black people could attend, but they weren't allowed to speak.
One of the most interesting things about this attempt to section off people according to group characteristics, first of all, is that it makes a claim which is self-contradictory on its own terms. It says simultaneously, a group of people cannot understand another group of people because they have not had the same lived experience. And it simultaneously says, but you must devote your life to trying to do so.
Right.
It's what I've described as the you must understand me, you will never understand me conundrum. But the moral evil, it seems to me, underneath it is this, is that if I cannot understand somebody who's black, and somebody who's Asian cannot understand me, and I can't understand a straight person can't understand me, and none of us who are male can understand women, and so then it's unclear how we should aspire to communicate in our lives.
Yeah.
And it's unclear why we would bother to read or talk or think across lines. It says we must be stuck in our silo. I must only read gay, white, male literature, because although I could try to read literature by other people, it's really not worth it because I'll never understand it. That suggests that we as human beings can never get beyond whatever trait we're born with. It's profoundly anti-human.
And we know that that's false for a number of reasons. For example, you're gay and I'm straight, but we both know what love is. We both feel love.
So, and I think there's nothing that either of us cannot understand about the other or their point of view.
Right.
I don't think there's anything you could say that I would say, I can't wrap my head around that because I'm gay.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything I would say that you would say, I just can't understand what Douglas is talking about, but it must be because I'm straight. It's such, on its own terms, a ludicrous and
Poisonous. It poisons interactions. But we also know that that's false because we do it all the time. We construct institutions. We go to the bank and make change.
Yeah.
We put in our order for lunch today.
Yes.
We don't know the gender or the sexual orientation of the person who took our lunch. So we certainly we do it with commerce, but we do it with commerce in the broadest sense when we create systems to do these things.
Yes, and it also, of course, it among other things, makes us retreat into the following problem, which is that if we can't understand each other, it's unclear how we could sort out any problem.
Right.
Other than through violence.
Right.
Because if either we can communicate successfully with each other as human beings, or communication is in some way impossible because understanding is impossible, and then what do we have other than violence?
Right.
Now, the thing that they claim to be wanting to avert is precisely the thing that they're most likely to encourage.
Right. And when you think about that, well, what if someone is gay and black? Well then, right, so there are ever divisions in which you can only communicate more narrowly with people
and
who share. Yeah.
Yes, and all of these things, because you know the intersectionalists are fascinated by this, aren't they?
Right.
They think there's nothing so interesting as finding interlocking oppressions and so on. And this in the identity politics and intersectionalist game is almost the heart of the game, because of the assertion that is made that all oppression in human existence is interweaved. That it is all interlocked, and that if you were to address one form of oppression, you would have to address the others. So the intersectionalists say it's not good enough to address remaining misogyny in society without addressing remaining misogyny in relation to black women in society. And then it's not sufficient to address remaining misogyny against black women in society. You must fixate on black trans women in society, and on and on and on. Some of which is interesting, and some of which, but it's a long way away from solving any problems, because among much else, it says this is so completely interlocked that to unweave it, to unlock it, you would solve something. And my suggestion is you can't, because all of these things are more complex even on those terms. For instance, what do you do with somebody who has some of those characteristics but ducks out from another aspect of it? What do you do about a black woman for whom their femininity is very important to them, but they don't have any interest in black issues? Or they identify as a black person, they'd rather not be reduced to being, a woman. And on and on and on along this way you go. And it seems to me that it's obvious that the intersections don't all resolve and find resolution. They madden people because there are all these tensions which are going to exist anyway.
Imagine taking that upon yourself and thinking that if you think this way, you are a better person. That, to me, is what is particularly maddening. It's the move from thinking about something to feeling it makes you a better person if you have this worldview. If you're constantly looking at people, so when you walk into a store and there's a mixed-race couple, that has to command a certain percentage of your attention.
To steel man what they think they're doing, they think that they're correcting injustices that have existed in the past by overcorrecting in the present.
Right.
So they think that because it's undoubtedly true that women have not always historically been able to achieve what they should have been able to achieve by dint of being a woman, because homosexuality was criminalized until the 60s, because this country in America, like many other countries in the world, had terrible racial problems throughout a significant portion of its history, which were not resolved until, you'd argue, the latter part of the 20th century, and some people think still not. But it suggests that because of that historic injustice, it must be rectified now by doing it the other way around, at least for a period of time.
That's equity.
Equity. So, because women undoubtedly didn't always have the opportunities they should have had, we'll make up for it by insulting men now.
Right.
You can do the same thing on the LGBT bit, but the most obvious one, the most really rancid and divisive one now, is black people undoubtedly had oppression in the past, so we'll make white people feel like the bad ones. And I think they think, this is steel manning and attributing good motive to it. I think they think they'll only need to do it for a time. Problem is,
the work is never done.
The work is never done. They don't know when they'd stop.
Right.
They don't know who would call time. And the crucial thing is, they don't know when the overcorrection doesn't end up swinging the other way. Like, you know, the question I always wonder on about this is it wise for the portion of feminist studies that decided that the best way to advance women is to insult men? Do they think long-term it's a good strategy to try to demoralize 50% of the population? It seemed to me unwise and a hard way to get support long-term.
If the goal is to reach some kind of a consensus.
If it's to reach a consensus. And the same, obviously, with racial issues. If you agree that because black people in history have been disadvantaged, is it wise, particularly in a country like America where the black population is, 13% of the population, is it wise to talk about the group that is the majority group still, white people, as if they are guilty beings who carry historic sin and can never be redeemed? It seems to me that if that is the plan in the overcorrection, I can see quite a lot of ways in which that goes wrong. Right? When I first started looking at identity politics, intersectionalism, and all that sort of thing, I knew that I should try to engage with the fundamental texts. What were the foundational texts? And one of the ones that I heard about a lot, one of the most cited texts, is Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And I thought when I got this text, I thought, well, you know, there must be something there. It'll be something to contend with. And no, it's a few pages of assertions made by this academic, many of which are erroneous, many of which are false, provably so. And yet this is one of the most cited texts, as if what it says is true. And the problem with that is you set up then this hierarchy fight. And the hierarchy fight involves people having to try to work out where they stand in a privilege structure. All of which is unsolvable because nobody can do it with one person throughout their life. Nobody can do it with everybody from one class of person throughout their life because people don't fall out like that and aren't able to be summed up like that. And you couldn't even do it hour by hour because it could change. I mean, you could have somebody who appeared to be at the very top of the hierarchy privilege pyramid who turned out, for instance, to have very serious mental problems. you didn't know that at 12 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock you find it out, and therefore you've got to move them around in the hierarchy of oppression. Nobody worked this out, because it can't be worked out.
What a weight. Like, seriously, what a weight to place upon someone as they walk through life to try to figure out what the oppression hierarchy is of the proletariat.
Yes.
I mean, just imagine, like, you're trying to navigate your life anyway, and then you superimpose on top of that an additional structure of grievance.
Yes. Which also, and grievance is obviously the key word here, isn't it? Because to teach somebody that they should feel grievance is, in my view, a quite wicked thing to do.
Right.
Because we all, in our lives, could have grievances. I mean, most of us do have some grievances, and it's not always been seen as a good thing to have.
Right.
It thwarts you in lots of ways. So to be encouraged to have grievances is to set somebody off from the beginning of their life in a direction which is highly likely to lead them to unhappiness. I mean, I would say that although there are legitimate grievances that people have, we should also be encouraged to try to reconcile themselves with the world, to harmonize themselves with the world, to recognize the things you can do things about and the things that you can't.
The serenity prayer.
Yes, absolutely. And this, the reason why that particular bit of wisdom goes across all world traditions is because it's a fundamental insight that in the same way as we know that if we see somebody on an average day and they ask how we are, we tend to say, great or fine. We don't say actually, my bowels are playing up.
Hey, you prick. Stop destroying my stasis shell. I need that to gain my abilities back. You're damaging no enemy. You're just destroying my crystal. Dude, what did I just fucking say, man? Fucking Blueberry. You should know better, man. No, you should know fucking better, man. I literally just told you. And what do? Destroy the fucking crystal. You're causing no fucking harm. I'm waiting for an enemy to show up to freeze him. Fucking retarded. Apparently you have the only common sense. Kayaba Master. Man, you're a frickin' idiot, mate. Yeah, you clearly heard me, fucking retard. You've been caught. Tier 7, what the hell are you doing in the classroom? Be right back, gotta grab my food.
today, and I've got that,
fortunate.
that, you know, Veruca's back, and so on, because, not just because they may not want to know the detail, but because we intuit that to do so in some way would make their day worse. You know, it would not only be a selfish thing to do, it would be to spread around grievance in a world which already has a lot of unhappiness, and which you don't need to add to. And this is one of the fundamental things, it seems to me, that's so wicked about this project. To encourage people to be more at odds with the world than we all already are. It's a fundamental moral error.
I think part of the problem with having a conversation with the end goal is that the work is never done. Part of the problem is also you can't identify the end goal because any disparity in outcome is just assumed to be racist. That's the de facto. If there is a disparity in outcome, race has to be at the, but not in everything, not in, for example, people who collect garbage. Or people who have higher risks of death, you know, truckers or something, or on death row, which is almost exclusively male. So I think that
Yes, nobody says we need more female representation on death row.
That's correct. That's correct. So I think that the key here is, what does it mean to have an equitable system as opposed to what it means to have a system in which we treat people equally?
Yes, yeah, this is the absolute heart of the issue, isn't it? I mean, we could get, I don't sound panglossing, but we could get almost total agreement, it seems to me, in American society on the idea that people should have an equal shot in their lives. I think that's a pretty good aspiration.
Right, and I'll give them what they're looking for. And this is where I think many conservatives have fallen. The idea that we can and should just pick ourselves up by our own bootstraps, that's a good idea. But it's far easier to do that if we have systems based upon fairness. For example, it's far easier to do that if everyone has a public education of the first rate, a la John Rawls. So the more there's a disparity in those starting conditions, and I would argue that it's primarily economic, which breaks down as a race as a proxy to that economic conditions. The solution to me seems to be fairness.
The
equality of opportunity as opposed to equality of outcome. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for equity. They want to advance equity, particularly the readjustment of shares as one's previous, quote-unquote, racial history factors into it.
Yes, so long as it's always in a beneficial light. I mean, we are so confused as a society now on all of this, aren't we? I mean, we are so confused. Most people, I think, would hear the words equality and equity as synonyms.
Right.
I think
Joe Biden, in fact, in the debate,
Right.
didn't know the meanings of those terms.
I think it's really troubling when very, very important distinctions are so little understood. Do we want an equal society? Yes, in many ways. Do we want a society where every profession has exactly the correct representation within it, depending on racial and other character traits of the general population, so that if you have less than 13% of the workforce in any sector of the economy, you've got to...
Right. We'd need some governing body to mandate that, and that would separate people from their own proclivities and interests.
Yes, it means that if you didn't have exactly 13% of black employees,
Right.
you would have to make sure you fired some employees of other races and put some black people in. It would also, of course, and this is the element that nobody ever wants to focus on, it would mean that if you had 19% of black employees in your firm, you'd have to get rid of some people who were black because they were black, because otherwise the whole racial quota system didn't work. Which, of course, opens up the same thing which is highlighted by the lack of female engineers, the lack of female firefighters, and much more, which is you probably can't do that unless it's seen to be in an area which it's desirable to be in by society at this moment, including highly remunerated jobs, high prestige jobs, and much more. That's, by the way, one of the reasons why every time that the equity discussion comes up and it's around the media or Hollywood, I just put my head in my hands, because I just think that these are the least typical professions imaginable and very bad places to play what remaining equality issues there are in society out, because almost nothing can be played at that level.
It seems to be a bizarre way to just think about things in the first place.
I think we should try to find problems that we could agree on and could solve. That's my view. For instance, I think we could agree on the following proposition across right and left, such as those boundaries exist. We could agree that, for instance, nobody in their lives should be held back from attaining a position they should or could attain, simply held back because of characteristics over which they have no say.
But we could only agree with that if our starting value isn't equity.
Yes, absolutely. And it would, of course, rely on, well, I mean, there are other things. It keeps certain people down who don't have the ability to perform a task. But the one I think we could agree on would be everybody capable of performing a certain task should be able to achieve that role in spite of any character traits of which they have no say. So, you know, and all the polling data in my own country, in the United Kingdom, like here in America, shows that there's pretty much total agreement on this. Very few people still think that a woman who's the best qualified person for a role shouldn't get the role because she's a woman.
Right.
Very few people in this society now think that, you know, a choice of two people for a job, one's white, one's black, the black person is clearly better qualified for the role, you shouldn't give him the role because he's black. There's very little of this around in our societies now, despite the catastrophizing claims of some of the social justice activists. But if we said, that's what we're aiming for, we're just aiming to get to a place where immutable characteristics do not dictate what you can achieve in your life, and should not. And once we've got there, and if we're not there yet, and you could argue that we're not, but once we're there, we'd like that ground to be held. You know, we don't want any snap back on it at any point. No. We could agree on that. The problem, the really sincere debate that is going on in our time, which we know too few people identify, is that there is a serious difference of opinion over how that is achieved. And that, broadly speaking, portions of the left say it should be achieved by forcing quota systems, for instance, on everything from universities to boards of corporations. And the right's answer is, I say this myself, is to an extent unsatisfactory, which is to say, don't push these things because it'll come out naturally anyway, so long as as you say, the Rawlsian preconditions are in place. So long as people have got a good education, they'll get there. Now, as it happens, I think both of those arguments have something to be said for them. But if you only believe the first of those two, then you create this world of pain.
The other thing is it causes poaching at the top of those minority communities. So the best people within those communities, they'll be highly fought over, but the people who are not as proficient or adept or lack those skill sets, what happens to them? And then don't you think that there's something that's alienating socially, that someone would say, well, they're only in that position because they're in certain immutable characteristics?
Oh, sure.
And think about how one would feel as a talented black person, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. This is
It's unbelievably humiliating and insulting.
This is one of my many reasons for objecting to all of this, which is that it makes everyone suspicious of everyone else. It means that everybody who is in a particular position, their colleagues might be weighing them up as to whether or not they were a diversity hire or not.
Right.
Somebody once pointed out to me that when at an American university in the 1960s or 70s, when you saw a black student colleague, if you were white, you knew that student was damn bright, you know, because among much else, they'd had to get through more hoops.
Right.
And then you get to the current status, and the same person said, they couldn't help thinking that exactly the reverse might be the case.
And couple that with the fact that they could never say that. So we have many people who are thinking that, and it's festering, and it's festering, and they're thinking that. And I happen to believe, I don't know if you believe this, but I happen to think that there's no such thing as a private belief. If you intensely believe something, like, well, and you can't speak about it, you can't engage in a dialogue, because then you could be accused of being a Nazi or racist. But you're thinking, well, geez, why is that black person in that situation? Are they affirmative actioned in? I can't help but to think the inevitable consequence of that would be you would treat them differently. And that is a stain on all of us.
Yes, and then you get the problem of the hierarchies that you create in the name of justice that simply create greater inequality.
Right.
I mean, inequality is more of a concern to the political left than it is to the political right for all sorts of reasons. But such as there is an argument about it, this game, the identity politics game, is a horrible place to address inequality, because you get the problems that I identify as being, for instance, a board or a university needs to improve its black or female or LGBT quota. The people they're likely to get that they're going to reach out to are, for instance, the woman who is about to be promoted anyway, or highly likely to be promoted anyway, the already very well educated black student, or indeed, in many of these cases, an already very privileged, in economic terms, student. I say this in my own country as being the issue of reaching out for diversity and getting a black old Etonian.
Interesting.
What have you actually done in this, other than create what appears to be a diverse board, or a diverse student body, or a diverse workforce, when in actual fact all you have done is just create a new, privileged, if in one way, diverse class of person? And you've got, for instance, zero class mobility, no working class representation at all. Or you get to the stage where you have no viewpoint diversity, because everybody is essentially from the same relatively privileged milieu.
Why do you think people are so hoodwinked by this?
Because it's an answer to a number of very big questions. In The Gap Left by Religion, it's an answer to the question of what should we be doing with our lives on Earth. That's a good question to address. And if you say, or anyone says, I have the answer, I know what you should be doing, I know what you should be doing.
Fighting for social justice.
You should be fighting for social justice. It's a reason to get up in the morning. It's a reason to go out campaigning in the afternoon. And it's a reason to fight over the dinner table and tell your family that they're bigots. This is purpose of a kind. And sorry, one other thing, which is, of course, it says, I mean, this is the real attraction. It says in a quasi-religious manner, in fact, it's better than religion. Because religion says if you sort these things out, then in a life to come, you will find salvation. And the social justice activists and the intersectionists and much more say, if you do all of these things, we can get justice here on Earth. And who wouldn't want that if it was able to be achieved and if it was offered to you? I mean, the appeal of it is extraordinary, because here is, I mean, the world is wildly unequal, may well always be, I think probably always will be, unequal in lots of ways. It's unfair in a huge variety of ways. Our own lives all bear out that experience. We know it collectively as well as individually. And these are all things we rail against or find peace against in our lives, as the case is. But if somebody comes along and says, no, we could solve all unfairness, inequality, inequity, you've just got to join us. Ordinarily, that's said by a cult.
Sounds very Baptist to me.
It's highly Baptist. It has so many resonances from the religious tradition, which is why I say I think it's trodden into that gap.
So one of the reasons I think people are so hoodwinked, I think they're hoodwinked by language. I think they're hoodwinked by these words. Equity sounds really good. Inclusion sounds really good. Diversity sounds really good. Safe space sounds really good. All of these words sound good, and most people, they don't really know what they mean. It sounds good and it makes them feel good.
Yes.
I mean, just think, anti-racism.
Yeah, who's not on board with that?
If you don't know the moral underpinnings of that, or Black Lives Matter, well, of course Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. It's a movement with literally no open opposition.
And they hoodwink you through those words, and the people say, I think it was Linda Sarsour who put out a tweet, Antifa, anti-fascist, that's all you need. What more is it than that?
Yes.
It is the power of language. There must be something in the brain's architecture or some evolutionary quirk or something that makes us susceptible to these things.
Well, in-group, out-group is the obvious one. It's once this stuff becomes the dominant theme of the time, once people agree on the reprehensible nature of racism, homophobia, bigotry, misogyny, once they agree on that, then of course they want to be on the side of people opposed to all that. The problem is then you jump onto the side of all the people who are opposed to all that and you discover they can do things as wicked as anyone else.
Right.
But one other interesting thing about that is that you mentioned language, and of course I've always thought one of the great advantages that any profession of faith or professed ideology has, strangely enough, is if it looks more complex than it is. I think a lot of people have been intellectually intimidated by the studies movements, by the grievance industry, by the intersectionalists. They feel intellectually intimidated by it because the language these people write in is far more complex than the really rather simple ideas they actually espouse. There's never a word they use that they don't add syllables to unnecessarily. You know, a problem is never a problem. It is a problematization. You never have a narrative. You always have a meta-narrative. And this is the case in every single term. Everything is made to sound more complex than it is, which, by the way, as a writer, annoys me, because I believe the task of writing is to try to take the most complex ideas and make them simpler, or at least simpler to understand than they might otherwise be. And here are a whole set of academics in particular who take really rather straightforward and simple assertions, which we could all understand, and they make them impossible to understand. They use such deliberately difficult language. And I think a lot of people before that, you know, people whose children return from college and spout this stuff, a lot of people, particularly parents, become intellectually intimidated by it. I think that it's the same thing with all of the implicit bias stuff and all that. You know, your boss tells you to do something that you feel isn't right, but they've got a whole language to explain it, and you don't really understand it, and you go along with it because you think you must be dumb. And you're not dumb. You're the cleverer person in the room if you've seen through that. But there's not much to help you. Then very few people are going to reach out. And there's a terrible opportunity cost if you're accused of all sorts of terrible things or even questioned.
The question about the parallels to religion is so interesting to me. So obviously we have to be woke, this is to be born again, blasphemy and political correctness, certain speech codes, the mechanism of enforcement there. How do we prevent people from saying certain things? Well, we have inclusion. We have certain apparatus, instead of apparatus of the state, we have the apparatus of the university system, for example, that we can punish wrongdoers. What parallels between wokeism as a religion and either traditional religions do you see, or do you think that wokeism is a religion?
I think it's got all of the preconditions necessary to identify it as a religion. It doesn't yet have an overtly clerical class, but it's not far off. It's very clever. I didn't think that after the main monotheism started to drift away as they did in recent decades, perhaps you might say recent centuries, I didn't think it was possible to come up with a brand new religion. But wokeism is about the best shot anyone has given it so far to come up with something original. And of course, it borrows so much from the religion of the society which it's come up in. You know, it borrows the Christian conception of guilt. The difficulty of which is that it might be guilt without redemption for many people.
No redemption.
No redemption. Of course, we're sitting in Portland. I was almost moved the other day at the courthouse to see that one of the massive bits of graffiti over the entirely graffiti-covered building said "Repent." Wow, that's a heck of a thing to see back.
And repent for things you haven't even done.
And pick up the religious
Right.
Traditions of how to repent.
Right.
I mean, here in Portland, there have been, for instance, ceremonies where white people prostrate themselves in the street in front of black people. I was speaking to somebody yesterday who was at one of these events and said that he didn't join in because he felt there was something a little off about it. That you're damn right there is.
Have you seen this stuff too?
Which one's that?
Where they raise their hands but instead of the Holy Spirit, they're raising their hands in front of black people.
Ah, I hadn't seen that one. I thought the other one was the borrowing of the Ashra tradition in Shia Islam, where you flay yourself. And there have been sites in recent months of white people flaying themselves in the street. And actually, on one famous video, black Americans coming rushing over to them saying, "Stop this. We don't want you to do this.
Right.
We never asked for this. What are you doing?" Quite rightly. But, I mean, this is all what happens when people stagger around an ideological wasteland looking for things to latch onto and remembering traditions that you might have thought have been lost.
And they want meaning.
Meaning.
And they're kind of a little bit too, I want to say savvy, but to people walking on water, to Muhammad flying to heaven on a winged horse, we realize that's largely silly by now. But racism is real. It's also interesting to me that love the sin, hate the sinner, that we're all guilty of original sin, and privilege is the original sin. James Lindsay and I wrote a piece of that in 2016. You can have an entire system in which nobody's racist, but the whole system is racist.
Yes.
And that, to me, is a fascinating concept. One of the ways we measure that is that we look at outcomes, the disparities in outcomes. So, I don't know, I've been lingering on something that you said about, in the old religions, you have a better life, better afterlife. But this is even more wicked than that, because the work is never done. There is no amelioration. There is no, or maybe there's just a minor gradation of solving the problem. But the problem is perpetual, it's perennial, it's deep-rooted, and every single person has to actively work, and we see this in education. We have to actively work constantly to find racism. And if you can't find racism in a situation, it's your problem. It's very similar to sin, except similar in that they're both imaginary. But it's different in that eventually you can find the sin.
Yes. And of course, at least with the Christian concept of sin, you also have the concept of hating the sin but loving the sinner.
Right.
In this scenario, you hate the sin and the sinner.
So here's my question to you. Do you think, and I fully admit I have struggled with this tremendously, do you think we're all better off as a society with a benevolent form of Christianity or with wokeism as we see it today?
Oh, I much prefer the old gods to the new ones.
Don't you? So do I.
You knew where you were with them.
Right. The system was transparent. They valued dialogue. They had a correspondence to your truth. What you said corresponded to something in reality. there was a way to redeem yourself. I mean, it's a fascinating situation in which it's the substitution hypothesis. It's the idea that people need something to believe.
Yeah.
And as religion in general, and Christianity in particular, has been on the decline, something has substituted or come in for that. And what that something is, maybe people don't know the word intersectionality or the term sort of critical race theory. But it's those ideas that have come in and substituted for ideas that have a long pedigree in Western culture. And I do think that we may be far better off as a society with benevolent forms of Christianity as opposed to the new religion, which is just wickedness.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, of course, we don't have a choice in a way. I mean, we're all, to some extent, flotsam and jetsam on a larger tide. One couldn't bring back a form of benevolent Christianity simply by willing it or saying that the alternatives are bad. You know, we are where we are because history happened.
There is something, though, about somebody who's very religious and they see you and they say you're a sinner, or they see me and they say you're going to go to hell. I've never respected that belief, but I've always respected that person. I've always respected the forthright speech that they have. The fact that they'll stand at you, they'll look you in the eye, they'll say that to you. I don't see that with the new religion. I see screaming, cry bullies.
Yes, because it sets up problems which it cannot answer. I mean, that's the big problem. Christianity sets up problems which it answers.
Right.
You have the fall of man, and then you have the redemption of man. You have the first Adam, and then you have the second. The real long-term evil of the woke ideology is, among much else, sets up problems which it cannot answer. For instance, I'm very interested in, as you know, the theological and philosophical problem of forgiveness, which I think is one of the most important things to think about in any society, and you bet it's got to be the thing we've got to think about in a society where you've got social media and young people making mistakes in view of the whole damn world. To not think about forgiveness in a society like that is to set up an awful lot of people for very thwarted and unhappy lives. So it preoccupies me quite a lot, but here's the thing. If you just take one aspect of the woke ideology, the problem, for instance, of being a cis, heterosexual white male, what is the redemption mechanism for that? They don't know, other than shut up, sit down, let everyone else speak. There's no way out of it other than that. Silence, which isn't a solution. Take another one, historical guilt. I've written about this in 2 books now. You know, historical guilt is a very, very tricky concept. The sins of the father being meted out onto the son goes back to the Christian comparison. Christian religion says sins of the father cannot be visited on the son. And the woke religion says, no, the sin of the great-great-great-grandfather must be visited on the great-great-great-great-grandson. And how do you expunge it? You can't. Never, never. That seems to be an especially wicked setup.
I want to go back to something you said about forgiveness. I think my own view is that sooner or later, this ideology is going to be exposed as the fraudulent sham it is. And the people who have been hoodwinked by it are going to be utterly enraged. And what we need to do is to welcome back, to forgive the proponents, the race grifters who've gotten us into this fucking mess, and welcome them back into the very society they're attempting to dismantle. So I think these people need to be forgiven.
There aren't many ways in which people can belong. People can belong by religious affiliation, national affiliation. I've got family, you might say clan or tribe. The woke ideology says you can affiliate by sexual orientation, gender, sex, and race. We all know the problems, and we're starting to know the problems that can come from that. The problem underneath this, in terms of answering this question, is we are all very familiar of the ways in which national belonging can go wrong. We should be better at knowing how racial belonging can go wrong in every direction. The obvious answer to all of this nevertheless lies in the other forms of belonging. In lieu of racial belonging, or in lieu of religious belonging, they come and go, ebb and flow. The most obvious answer to all of this stuff is national belonging. And by the way, I wouldn't give up on that entirely.
Really?
Yeah, I especially wouldn't give up on it in America.
But you are from a small island.
Well, it's not that small.
And yet,
Crete is small. Well, Malta's small. We're like a kingdom.
but yet you, but yet we're friends, and you're sitting here, and we're hanging out, and we eat sushi,
Yeah.
and so that like transcend. But the transcendent part of that, of the relationship, is, I would say, it's a love of truth. We have commonalities. We should.
Well, none of this is to say that these things can't transcend nation. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that as the late Roger Scruton said, that national belonging is the widest possible application of the first-person plural. It's the widest possible application of we. Feeling belonging in things that your nation has done, even if you've not had any role in it. Belonging even maybe when your ancestors weren't in this nation, but you still feel a sense of we about the nation. The reason I say, by the way, that I wouldn't give up on that in America in particular is that the American ideal, many of the American ideals, do have the capacity, the capability, even if it's a flawed one, to transcend racial, sexual, and other lines. Because you can say, it doesn't matter what race you are. I mean, again, people will say this hasn't happened historically, and I'd concede myself. But you have the ability in this country to say, look, it doesn't matter what damn gender, sexual orientation, or race you are, we're Americans. That seems to me not to be something that should be given up lightly or given up on lightly. It is one very good answer to that, to say we are equal under the law, for instance. What a wonderful aspiration, even if it's not always perfect in practice or exactly met in practice. But my point is that since there are very limited ways to belong in groups larger than the family or the circle of friends, we should revisit and think about all of these things. And the only reason we don't is because we know all of the ways in which they can go wrong. But as I always remind people, everything can go wrong. I mean, love can go wrong. Love can cause wars. Love started the Trojan Wars. We don't try to ban love. We don't remain totally suspicious of love as a consequence of that. Why can't we accept that everything can go wrong, including racial affiliation, gender affiliation, national affiliation, but they can also be the tools to get some things right. And belonging in a nation, it would seem to me, certainly in America, is a way to suppress some of these battles, is to try to get beyond them again, and not to split apart over them. And what I, as obviously a non-American, but as a lover and admirer of this country, think is that it's so sad that so many Americans seem to be giving up on that unifying ideal.
I think that ideal is the shining city on the hill. I think that ideal is what America ought to stand for, and I think that's what's so difficult to me, to see not only the physical acts of violence and physical acts of vandalism, but the intellectual vandalism perpetrated by this girl. And I don't think that this is a large number of true believers. I think we're looking at a fringe percentage of the population in which they've sucked in a lot of these people to have the police. But I want to go back and I want to answer that question directly. So my response to that would be, it's not a very glorious response, but it's a true one. You have to attend meetings. You have to show up at your workplace when they're having these conversations. You have to know what people are talking about. And when you engage these ideas, the first order of business is for you to learn about them.
Yeah.
Your books have been fantastic. But it's even beyond learning about them. Different people have different skill sets. You're a writer, you're a world famous writer. You can bring a certain skill set to this that other people can't. Maybe some people are artists. Are you an artist?
I'm not.
Okay, well then you can't bring that skill set.
Yeah.
So maybe some people can do memes, they can do art. And maybe some people are not artists and they're not writers and they're terrified to speak before people, but they have some financial means. So maybe they want to make a financial contribution. But make some kind of a contribution and know what it is that you're making a contribution to. My other response to that is the Greek value of parrhesia, speaking truth in the face of danger. We cannot be held hostage to the delusions of other people.
Yeah.
We cannot be held hostage to the irrationality and dangerous, divisive nature of this ideology.
Everybody can say the truth as they see it. Everyone can raise concerns whenever they see them. Nobody should be silent. Nobody should feel intimidated. Nobody should put up with being bullied. Not in a free society. In a totalitarian society, in a dictatorship, sure, people have to put up with being bullied. They don't have to put up with it in America. They really don't have to put up with it. So, when somebody in your workplace says you must read these books, ask why. And ask them if they insist you read them, and there are government agencies in my country that have insisted the workforce read the following improving texts. Say, okay, if this is an exchange of ideas, I'm willing to have an exchange of ideas. Here's some books I think you should read. Let's do a swap. Can have a book discussion.
Given the madness of crowds.
I couldn't say it myself. But if your child is at school and they're being taught racial bias stuff, if they're being told that they're intrinsically racist, take your child out of the school or go to the school and say, I will not have racism taught to my child. Not in any direction. You don't get to do it. Now, if enough people did that, it would stop. It would stop. I have versions of the words people should use. Say to people trying to do this, I will not take part in the re-racialization of my society. I will not. If you want to do it, you can do it to your kids, and they will suffer the poison from it. Not my kids. Not on my turf. If every parent who was worried about this did that, it would stop. It would stop tomorrow. The reason it doesn't is because of intimidation.
Fear.
Fear.
People are afraid.
And, you know, there are lots of reasons historically for people to be afraid. But in America today, it isn't easy for people. I don't by any means underestimate this. But it's better than at any time in history to voice what you know to be true.
I think my answer is much simpler. It's to show up. You have to show up. You have to show up and you have to pay attention and you have to really understand what people are talking about. And ask questions if you don't understand. I would say the first thing to do is don't even challenge at all. Just ask questions. Well, what does that mean? What do you mean when you use the word equity? What does it mean to have an inclusive space? Because an inclusive space ultimately means that you have to have a speech restriction. Because if you didn't, people wouldn't feel welcome, and then they wouldn't feel that they're included in the space. So I think it's important to show up, ask questions, be on the same page about what people mean about words. And I know that must sound academic, but it's not. Because that's one of the ways that people are being fooled by this, is that we're being beholden to these words that we don't know what they mean. Well, of course there should be equity in a school system. Really? Well, what do you mean by equity? The other thing I think people should do is, you're absolutely correct. People will be ridiculed or they'll be treated with derision if they question this dominant moral orthodoxy. And I think what they have to do is to not be intimidated by people who do that. And among the ways that you can do that is you can find people who have similar views. You can go online. In person, of course, it's difficult now. But I think as long as you have an ability and a sincere ability in yourself to be willing to revise the beliefs that you have, to be willing to change your beliefs, even if the people with whom you're talking don't have that, I think that is a way for you to take the legitimate moral high ground. And not just moral high ground, an intellectual high ground too. What else do you think people can do to fight back? To say, when people have had, either if they've had enough already, or they're seeing it rise, like the frog in the water, the frog in the boiling water. Did you have that expression on the island? Okay, so there.
We have frogs.
Okay.
We can even boil water.
I don't know if you had stove.
We mastered
I don't know if you had
boiling water
stove
a few years
technology,
ago.
but
Yeah.
but okay.
We're there.
So what? This interview might be over very quickly. So what do people do if they've either? Here's what I really want to say. What do people do before they've had enough? They see the writing on the wall. What do?
First thing is to trust their instincts. Trust their instincts and know that if there's something that makes them uncomfortable, it isn't because what's happening is true, but because what's happening may be false. Everything says to them, if you are uncomfortable, that's good. Actually, your instincts will tell you, I'm uncomfortable about that thing happening. Quite often it's because the thing that is happening is wrong. Trust your instincts.
Right, and it's really interesting. I would say trust your doubts too.
Yes, absolutely. And test them out, against other people's. Organize, definitely. Group, speak up. And, people also need to know the simplest shortcuts to try to undermine the reprehensibly demoralizing and divisive things of the time. I suggest a number in The Manners of Crowds at the end. One of the simplest and most effective is just to always say, compared to what? What exactly are you comparing us to? If you say we live in a racist society, compared to what? Compared to where?
Right.
Name your country. Name your country. If you say, at this point, we are living in X situation, compared to what? What historic situation is it that you would like us to be aiming for?
And on that note, I would say when you do have these conversations, keep your cool.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Keep your cool.
Yeah.
Because invariably, if people choose to have those conversations with you across that divide, they are not keeping their cool.
No, I've noticed that.
And most of the time, it's because they've come from a university system where they've never heard those ideas. So they're brittle. And
yes.
So when they first hear them...
Yes, and I'd also add that the woke ideology, like all ideologies that claim to be totalistic and comprehensive, has massive advantages because it tells people what they should be doing with their lives, and it tells them the meaning of life, and it gives them purpose and much more, as we described. But it's also wildly simplistic. It's both simultaneously both highly complex and wildly simplistic. And my own view is that, among other things, we need to reacquaint ourselves with the real complexity of life, which is that people are complex. That we are not in an existential fight between the children of light and the children of darkness. It isn't an endless replay of the 1930s in which you are the anti-Nazi and everyone on the other side is the Nazi. It's more complex than that, and it runs through all of us. That's why I particularly mind the cult-like thing of saying, if your parents don't agree with you or your grandparents don't agree with you, cut them off, cut off relations with them. Apart from the fact that that is a cult behavior, pure and simple. It ignores one of the most important lessons in life, which is people you love will think differently from you.
And that's okay.
And That's okay.
That's probably good.
Can you imagine how boring the world would be if everybody you loved and met in your life all thought exactly the same as you? It shouldn't be the aspiration. It shouldn't be the desire. Sure.
You know, there's an actual word in English for that. It's called a hive mind. It's been portrayed in many video games. It's never a good thing. Ever. You never think for yourself. The mind thinks for you. You do for the mind. You do for the hive. You do for the whole collective, for the community, whatever you want to call it. It's been treaded through in history. So maybe people need to pick up a history book.
We can agree on things that on some basic standards, but other than that, you know, you'll lose elections, you'll win elections, your guy will win, your guy will lose.
And more often than not, if somebody has a different belief, if someone holds a different belief, it's not because they're a bad person.
Yeah.
It's either because they have different starting information, or maybe they know something you don't know.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's one of the most important lessons, isn't it? Assume it's possible that the person you're dealing with, particularly I have to say an older person you're dealing with, may know something you don't. May know something about the world that you don't. It's such an important thing for people to realize. And to realize, as you said, such an important point is that that people who think differently from you do not necessarily think differently from you because of malign motives.
Right.
And in that case, that's really interesting to find out why they think the way they do. And you may discover the worst case scenario is that, you know, you have a different view, and the fact that they think differently helps you realize why you think as you think. Best case scenario is, if they're right and you're wrong, you should learn fast that that's the case. So if you are setting up a system in which you believe you're solving every inequity on earth and actually you're creating hell, you should find out about it fast. You should find out about it fast. Don't waste a day more of your life on this crap. And don't make people around you who love you and who you love suffer because you've given in to a cult-like behavior.
And we've created that exact system. We have agents of misery everywhere.
Absolutely. And, you know, just one other thing on that is, we should realize this is not what we should spend our lives doing.
Right.
You know, we live at the most fortunate time in human history. We have access to almost all of the world's information on a tiny device in our pockets. We can listen to the world's music, read the world's texts, communicate to people on any other continent on the planet at any time we choose. The idea that we're spending these years talking about race and character traits, we could work out how to live on Mars in this time. We shouldn't be wasting this time. We should be using it well.
The real estate market is rapidly shifting. So if you're thinking about selling a house anywhere within about an hour of Vernon, and you want to make sure you get as much for your house as you could and should when you sell, then this message is specifically for you, because we'd love to share with you a brand new, better way to sell that's working best right now in today's market. Sellers using this method are getting way better results than those using the old-fashioned traditional ways. So sellers in and around Vernon, down to Kelowna, and all throughout the local area, statistically speaking, these sellers are getting way more when they sell, and in a more convenient way. Now, if you'd like to find out a little bit more about exactly what these sellers are doing so that you too could get more money more conveniently, we can help you with that by giving you the 3 things that can help you to sell for more money right now. Just click that big blue button located around this video. It's probably in the bottom left or maybe below this video. Then answer a few super easy questions about the type of property you're trying to sell. And then instantly, we'll send you a PDF version of a brand new book that spells out in great detail exactly what these sellers are doing. And when I say we're going to send it to you instantly, I mean, you're going to get it within about 5 seconds. That's because we're going to text it to you, because your phone is probably in your hand right now, or it's right next to you. The second thing that we're going to give you is a home seller's checklist guide, and you'll find this super helpful to organize and streamline your sale. And then the third thing that we're going to give you is a price that you could get for your property if you were to sell using the methods that are described in this book. Because again, remember, these sellers are getting more money. You could get more money too. How much more? Well, we can tell you that. So click that big blue button and get your book and your checklist instantly. Now, we can't send you the price instantly because this is not some type of automated home valuation algorithm thing. Everybody knows that those are never accurate. So instead, we'll have a real person crunch some numbers behind the scenes, and then we'll get back to you within about 5 minutes with a truly accurate price. So go ahead, click that big blue button, get your book, get your checklist, and get your price, and you will be set to sell. Thanks.
Dumpster fire in the car park. No one knows what the hell is going on. Fire brigade just letting it burn. Years ago, this town went to the dogs. And everybody can see there's something wrong.
Literally jumping from game mode to game mode. Not responding to a message. Not responding to a fire team member. What the fuck is wrong with people? Like, I'm not gonna give you shit if you say you're busy or anything, but I am gonna get mad at you if you're gonna outright ignore me. That is fucking pathetic. Are you adults? Or are you truly retarded children? Truly retarded children? I don't want any part of it.
The Guardian is on approach to the Pyramid outpost now. No major troop movements to report. Something's up.
I agree. The Shadow Legion invested heavily in fortifying the EDZ. But it's quiet as a Trustland church mouse out here.
I don't like it. Stay sharp, Guardian.
Cosmodrome was dreary enough, but compared to this, it looks positively cheerful.
That's saying a lot for someone who hangs out at the EDZ.
Oh, I don't know. Trostland has a certain old-world charm to it.
We need to get you out more, Devrim. After all this is over, how about I take you for a joyride? We'll see the sights.
Good idea. I'll bring Mark. We'll make a double date. These blights are more resilient than the ones in the EDZ.
They may only be dissolved after you have collected the essences of power.
I'm freaking padded stations there. Or ignore me, fuck them. You guys are all gonna carry them. I'm just gonna enjoy the loot. You know these retards? Fuck you. Thanks for the loot.
It's strange that the pyramid appears perfectly identical in reality and the Ascendant Plane. All else seems a bit scattered.
Both are expressions of the darkness, aligned perfectly to the will of the witness.
I know a lot of folks feel different, but I still don't trust anyone using the darkness. Even for good. No offense, Queen Mara.
Loading screen like that.
The enemy has foreseen your incursion. Survival must now be your priority.
You've got the high ground. Keep your eyes up.
You know, a team that works together is going to win a lot easier than you always You're rushing into the battle. You need to hit someone going on. There's three of us, so work as a team. Double the dice. Even on this, it's about time the blueberries are actually worth their weight in salt.
Looks like the Guardian's back outside. Did you pull them out, Queen Mara?
I did not. This was the will of the Defenders.
That ain't good. Must have been one of their scions. Those little guys are sharp.
This setback is auspicious. The stronger the defense here, the weaker the attack on
Always a
Neptune.
point where their ass gets clapped. Always is.
Reinforcements converge on your position. Ignite the balefires and they will be powerless against you.
Just don't forget to look up. If it were me defending this place, you'd already be in my crosshairs.
You wanna be a perk? Here's a perk. Here's a perk in return, man. You don't like it, do ya? Now smarten the fuck up. I know you both can hear me, so... What's your fucking excuse? Nah, man, I'm waiting for you to pull your fucking weight through there. No one's waiting here but me. With YouTube. Told you to stop rushing, what did you do? You rushed even fucking more. Told you to stop breaking your shard, but here's the point of shit, what did you do? You kept breaking it more.
Your assistance has been
Good
invaluable,
fucking blueberries.
Holiday. But the Guardian and I are sufficient for what lies ahead.
Just admit it,
I
man.
suggest
You're a
you
fucking
recuse
blueberry.
yourself from further combat for your own safety.
With all due respect, Your Highness, you can stick that
Yeah,
right up
you,
your
Tiger.
distributary. It ain't Guardians being snatched up by the Shadow Legion. Ordinary folks like Devrim and me. I'm in this fight till all our people are safe. End of story.
Your spirit is commendable, if ill-tempered.
Smarten the fuck up or pound
You
your
remind
head
me of Petra.
Fucking wall, kids.
I shall advise you no
I have spent so much fucking money on this game, and now it's turned into a giant infestation. I might not come back to Destiny for quite a while here. Just you two. Oh, he's here.